And now, wielding a red sword. Chapter 9. Lachesis. A few days later another battle was shaping up, and the grim horsemen gathered again at the front of the castle. Rapture shuddered as she saw them in their impressive white, red, black, and brown cloaks, their matching horses stamping their hooves and snorting with eagerness. "Must you associate with those ruffians?" she asked. "I realize that you have a job to do exactly as you would have had as a Rajah, but these casteless creatures—" "I fear I must," he sang. "I did not choose them, but I did choose to assume the office of war, and they are the handmaidens of war." She laughed, somewhat hysterically. "Handmaidens! But I will try my best to minimize the conflict I supervised today," he continued. "War may be inevitable, but it doesn't have to be totally destructive if properly managed. Then those subsidiary incarnations will not have much benefit from it." She had to be mollified. "Return as soon as you can, my beloved. I don't like being here without you." "Well, you can return to Luna's house in the mortal realm," he reminded her, "or you can go to the garden and have something to eat." "You would have to take me to Luna's house, and anyway she's busy. She's nice and always polite, but she is engaged in local politics, and I don't like to take up her time. But the garden—" She trailed off. "I'm sure nothing there can hurt you," he sang. "I wouldn't trust Satan unduly, but he is currying my favor, and he knows that what pleases you is likely to please me. You could go and talk to Lila to see whether she is worthwhile." Rapture brightened. "Yes, I must find out how well she sews and weaves, and whether she dances." Mim smiled inwardly. What a neat solution to her problem. Concubines did a lot of sewing and weaving in their off hours, supervised by the wife. Sometimes the kingdoms of modern India had contests between the harems of their ranking nobles to see which produced the finest tapestries, and great honor accrued to the wives who organized the winning shows. It was said that the wives were more interested in the harems than the husbands were, though there was a snide side to that remark. But this exchange reminded him of Satan's influence on his present existence. Satan was helping to make Rapture happy, and Satan could help to make her unhappy. That remained awkward. He had read 5 Rings, and it had provided him with much upon which to cogitate. But he had not yet digested it sufficiently to apply it to Satan. The heart of the book, as he now understood it, was the 5 great rings which equated on one level to the 5 elements: ground, water, fire, wind, and void. None of these were simple concepts, and complete understanding would require long experience and contemplation. But it was as if it were a chart for his future understanding. Once he comprehended the full nature of each of the rings, he should possess sufficient understanding of the universe to know his true course. He intended to work on it. He donned his golden cloak, mounted his palomino, and rode out with the others. This time they descended on the border between 2 so-called Middle Eastern nations, whose long-dragged-out war had broken out again after the breakdown of a truce. Persia was preparing a massive assault on the entrenchments of Babylonia, and the scale was far larger than that of Gujarat and Maharashtra had been. There was no single spot that Mim could settle on for effective supervision. There were thousands of troops deployed along a front hundreds of kilometers long. Last time he had sought to enter the mind of a general and had made little progress. This time he wanted to act with better effect. He had to gain a proper understanding of what was going on here. Then he could devise some strategy to diminish the wastefulness of it. Perhaps it would be better to phase into the situation of one of the common troops. "When is Persia's attack scheduled to be launched?" Mim inquired of Conquest, whose business it was to know such details. "Not for several hours yet," the white-caped warrior replied. "That will give us opportunity to plan for the greatest harvest." "Then I shall make my own investigation during that period," Mim sang. "See that nothing starts prematurely." Conquest nodded. War's word was law to those others, for he was the primary incarnation here. He rode to the lines of Babylonia first. He saw in a moment that the defenses were formidable. Behind towering masses of barbed wire there were extensive minefields, and beyond these were concrete abutments and hardened emplacements for machine guns. Any human attack on these fortifications would commence at the cost of many, many lives. If it broke through, only a small fraction of the attacking troops would survive. Obviously, the Persian military command was aware of this. What kind of an attack did it contemplate? There had to be something special. Mim rode to the other side. None of the mortals saw him, or his horse, of course. He rode through the barbed wire without being touched, and into the Persian formation. There were only a few armed men at the front. The majority were in special camps, getting ready for the assault. Who would be best to identify with for the ground-level survey? Mim pondered momentarily, and decided on a random sampling. He would enter the camp, count off heads, and take the 10th soldier he found. He found a large, crude, temporary barracks building. He rode through the wall. There were the troops, massed for a preparatory briefing. Mim counted heads, identified the 10th, and dismounted. "Be near when I need you," he directed the horse. Then he strode to the soldier he had identified, stood before him, and backed into the man. In a moment he overlapped him and felt the confusion of double identity. Slowly his eyes caught the focus, and his ears became those of his host. The sensations of the body became his own. He was still himself, but also, gradually, the soldier. He concentrated solely on tuning in, on aligning the sensations of the mortal body with his own, so that his identification clarified. This took some time. While it occurred, the body was going about its own business, but this was a necessary delay. For one thing, the body used an alien language. The only way that Mim could understand it was to orient on the meaning as registered by the brain rather than the actual sounds of it. He made steady progress in this, but the process could not be rushed. The first significant thing he realized was that this body was young. This was no man, this was a boy of about 11. Yet he was definitely a soldier. He had the military garb and a rifle, and he had been drilled in its use. He was now being exhorted to go into battle for the honor of his country. It was, the instructor was assuring him and the other boys of this command, a great honor to fight for one's country, and a greater honor to die for it in this holy war. He must go out and destroy the infidel enemy. A child, Mim thought. They were all children, some younger than this one, all garbed in ill-fitting military uniforms, bearing archaic rifles with limited ammunition, and steeped with the fervor of fanaticism. He thought of the formidable Babylonian emplacements he had viewed. These children would be crucified against those defenses. He probed in the mind for some comprehension of what lay ahead, but none of that information had been provided. This young boy was very like an Occidental cow in the corral, moving with the herd toward the slaughterhouse. Cows were never treated in that barbaric fashion in India, of course. It seemed that Persia, having largely exhausted its experienced adult personnel, was now throwing the lives of its children into the breach. They would die like flies. But perhaps they would force an opening in the enemy line that the experienced troops could then exploit. It made sense on one level. It was pointless to throw away seasoned troops on an impossible assault and leave the children to carry the major part of the action. Better to confine the heavy losses to those who were least trained, then use the effective troops where and when they could count. But Mim was sickened by this tactic. What barbarism threw away the hope of its future, its children, in such manner? But he drew on his own memory to fill in more of the picture. This war had started when Babylonia, perceiving an opportunity to take advantage of its weakened neighbor, had invaded, seeking to add territory and acquire important seaports. Babylonia had acted with complete indifference to international law, grabbing at anything it supposed wasn't nailed down. Persia had fought doggedly back with inadequate personnel and resources, and turned the tide, driving the invader back out of its territory. Naturally, the losses had been substantial. Had Persia confined itself to conventional recruitment, it would not have had the personnel to do the job, so it had reached into its reserves, the reserves of its future, in order to guarantee that there would be a future for its national identity. Outsiders like Mim might condemn such desperation, but what would he have done as the leader of Gujarat if his kingdom had found itself in a similar situation? Some evils were simply not to be tolerated, and among these was capitulation to brutal conquest. He explored the attitude of the boy and found some justification there. The internecine war, dragging on as it had decimated the population of the region. The boy's family had been ruined by the passage of the troops both directions. The crop had been destroyed, the father drafted and killed, the brothers driven away, the mother forced to work at starvation wages in a failing effort to sustain her remaining family, one sister raped and killed at age 12, and the other simply stabbed by the bayonet of an enemy soldier when she screamed in fear and protest. This boy, 11, had joined his nation's military service in order to get money for his mother, who was working herself to death. This removed from her the burden of sustaining him and made it possible for her to buy some additional food and pay rent in a temporary camp for refugees. This boy had taken the part of a man during desperate times, as had the other boys of this unit. If he died in battle, a death benefit would accrue to his mother. If he survived, he could continue contributing to her support. He was proud to do this, and Mim was forced to echo this pride. Given the situation of this region, the boy had done what he had to do, with honor and courage that would have befitted a man of any age. No, Mim could not condemn that. Neither could he condemn the nation of Persia for using boys of this age. There was almost nothing else they could be used for in this place and this time, and using them made it possible for them to serve both themselves and their nation. If this boy were discharged at this moment from this service, it would not be a victory for what was right and good. It would be disaster. Mim found himself both glad and sad that he had chosen to share this young soldier's experience. How true it was, a man had to walk a distance in the shoes of another to understand the other's situation. Now he understood enough of the local situation, he could withdraw from this host and return to his own form to supervise the coming battle. But now he knew this boy, and he found he could not simply desert him at this stage. He knew that the boy was headed straight for death, and not an honorable, hard-fought death, for a slaughter. He had to do something, but what? This war had been grinding on, with brief intermissions such as the one that helped eliminate Mim's predecessor, for years. Its momentum was inexorable, and the damage it had already done was staggering. Even if he managed to abolish it this moment, the carnage it had wrought would remain. Mim struggled with this as the preparation for the onslaught proceeded. Could he remove this boy from the locale, at least saving his life? But that would cause him to be branded a deserter, and how would the lad fare then? Looking into the boy's mind, Mim saw that this was no solution. The boy had to be allowed to complete his mission in whatever manner he could. Could he manage to get this battle called off? Not by any action of this boy. He had chosen the wrong host for that. Now it was too late to phase into another. The boy's unit was being marched directly to the front. The attack would commence within the hour. There was nothing Mim could do. Yet still he did not leave the boy. He had to find some way. The unit formed at the top of a small hill. Other units formed to either side. There were thousands of youths in this action. Most of them would be dead an hour from now. And what would they have accomplished? The order to attack was given. Bravely the boy charged over the brim of the hill and down toward the enemy line. His associates ran beside him, their faces grim, but also charged with the unholy joy of the mission. They were engaging in the holy war. They were half drunk with the glory of this combat as harangued into them by the instructors. Theirs, as the words of another culture had phrased it, not to reason why, theirs, but to do and die. For moments there was nothing from the enemy. Then the big guns fired. Shells detonated in the midst of the charging line. The Babylonians had this section zeroed in, awaiting this very charge. One went off not far from Mim, and he felt the blast of it. He turned his head to look and saw something flying at him. It landed before him, a human arm, severed at the shoulder. Now, suddenly, the truth hit home to the boy. This was a death field. Whether he lived or died had no relation to his personal merit. It was random. If a shell landed on him, he was gone. If it didn't, he was free to keep running. Nobody cared. There was nothing he could do to save himself. It all depended on the shells. The boy froze. He was a boy. He had not been hardened to the reality of his own complete impotence. He had thought that somehow things would turn out all right if he just did the best he could and obeyed orders. Now he knew that was not true. The realization paralyzed him. The sounds of the slaughter became loud in the boy's ears. Not all of the victims of the shells were dead, but many were dying. Scattered, anguished exclamations projected from the overall noise. "My foot! It's hanging by a flap of skin! I can't see! My eyes are all blood! Where did those intestines come from? Allah preserve me, they're mine! My friend, his shoulder is gone, and half his head!" The boys, stunned, simply did not know what to make of the horrendous carnage. They were reacting like sightseers in these first moments of horror. But very soon they would get down to the serious business of bleeding to death. The charge had been broken, but still the shells came. Mim, with his training in the military arts and his experience as a commander, automatically analyzed the pattern of the detonating shells. There were 5 big guns oriented on this region, and they were firing sequentially so that it was possible to judge the approximate locations of the forthcoming blasts. One was due for this spot in a few seconds. Mim extended his will and took over the boy's paralyzed muscles. He had not realized he could do this. Perhaps he could not had the boy been operative, but under this immediate pressure he did. He plunged directly forward, getting as far away from the critical location as he could. The shell landed behind him. The blast of it half lifted him, throwing him forward. In that moment he spied an incarnation. He knew it was one because he saw a large spider slide in from some celestially anchored thread and convert to a middle-aged woman whose eyes were fixed on him. He willed the sword to still the scene. The action of the battle froze, with boys locked in place in mid-stride, and pieces of boys paused in mid-air. "Mars, whatever are you doing?" the woman demanded. "Who are you?" he demanded in return, using his necessary sing-song. "I am Lachesis." "Ah, Lakshmi, goddess of fortune," he agreed. "What?" He smiled. "There seems to be parallels between your mythology and ours. I recognize your nature." "But I am only one aspect of 3, she said, nonplussed. She wavered, and was replaced by a beautiful young Oriental woman, then by an old Negroid woman. Then she was back to her original form. "Yes, Lakshmi has an aspect for each of Vishnu's incarnations, to be his consort in each. When she manifests with only 2 of her 4 arms, she is the most beautiful of women." The lovely Oriental reappeared, intrigued. "Oh?" Then the original Lachesis reasserted herself. "Stop this nonsense. I'm not part of your pantheon. I am the incarnation of fate, whose threads govern the lives of mortals." "Those lives are ending," Mim pointed out. "No one can govern them now. All human events are arranged by fate." Lachesis said firmly. "Like the tide, I will have my way." The tide. Something connected in Mim's mind. Water!" he exclaimed. "What?" "In the organization of the Book 5 Rings, one of the 5 major strategies is based on water, but we 5 incarnations may relate to this framework. War is fire, fate is water." "Perhaps," she said, nonplussed. "I will debate theology with you some other time. Right now I must have an answer. Just what do you think you're doing here?" Mim was still a bit bemused by this abrupt encounter with the Occidental fate with the spiderweb. "I am trying to manage this battle," he sang. "By using children?" "One must work with the resources one has," he sang uncomfortably. "I don't like this, but it seems to be necessary." "I have very little concern for what you may consider to be necessary," Lachesis said severely. He could see that, though she was past her physical prime, she had the underlying structure of a supremely beautiful woman. It would have been interesting to have seen her in her youth. "You are using children in war, and while I recognize that you have certain prerogatives, this use is not something I am prepared to tolerate." Mim did not like the use of children in war himself, but this put him on the defensive. "Exactly what business is this of yours, Fate?" he demanded. "It is my business to handle the threads of life, Mars," she repeated with some asperity. "In my several aspects I spin them, I measure them, and I cut them to proper length. When you put them into a suicidal war and kill them off wholesale, you are disrupting the pattern I am setting up. I cannot sit idly in my abode while you shear off those early threads." There was something about Lachesis that seemed familiar, though he could not identify it. He was sure he had not encountered her before. He had been bothered the same way about Luna. "But war is my business, and these are soldiers. Lives are my business, and these are children." "Why didn't you route these young threads elsewhere, then?" he demanded, still bothered by the feeling that he should know her from somewhere. "This situation was in the making long before I assumed this office. I don't like it, but I must make the best of it. I see no better way than to complete this battle and try to send the survivors home with honor." "With honor!" she exclaimed, outraged. "What honor is there in pointless death?" "This boy I am studying now is earning his own support and that of his mother in the only way available to him," Mim sang. "He is serving his nation. There is no other way for him. He must do what he has to do, or worse evil will befall him and his companions. I regret this situation deeply, but if this battle could be made to disappear, it would not bring back this boy's father or his brothers or provide food or shelter for him. I am trying to discover how to minimize the ill effect of this battle and this war, but the situation is complex, and simplistic protests by the uninformed will not accomplish anything useful." "Simplistic protests!" she exclaimed furiously. Now, in her wrath, she seemed more than ever familiar. Her fair hair, the bones of her face. "Uninformed? You can't talk to me like that. I am Fate. I don't care if you're Davy herself. This is my business." "I don't have to put up with this," she said. She shimmered, became the large spider, and disappeared. Mim was about to free the stasis and permit the battle to resume, when Lachesis reappeared. This time she had a woman with her. Mim stared. It was Rapture. Rapture stared about her, appalled. "The blood!" she cried. "Where am I?" "You are on the site of Mars's business," Lachesis said. "I thought you'd like to join him at work." "She doesn't belong here," Mim cried. "Oh?" Fate inquired. "She is immortal, and the thread of her life is subject to my manipulation. I thought it appropriate to allow her to participate in your activity. When this battle of children resumes, she will be among them." Mim was stricken. Rapture would be killed in short order, and even if he managed to rescue her from the carnage, her mind would be profoundly affected. "Take her back!" he cried. "Are you ready to deal, Mars?" Lachesis demanded sternly. This was coercion, but he was vulnerable to it. "Yes," he sang grimly. Fate shimmered, changed, and vanished with Rapture. In a moment she reappeared alone. I arranged for a similar scene to appear on the television program she was watching, she said. Later she will believe that it was only a bad daydream sponsored by that program. Her gaze oriented on him. Now I expect you to abate this war forthwith, so as to give me opportunity to rout the children out of it. I would prefer to have the children out of it, he exclaimed, but I haven't found any way. Then we shall find a way, she said, right now. These children are here because Persia needs them for its war effort, he said. I really don't see the point in war anyway. It is a product of the natural tensions and inequities of society, he explained. Without war there would be no redress for certain wrongs. War is only harmful when it is poorly managed. Oh, pooh, she snorted. That sounds like something Satan would say. That set Mim back. Satan had said it. Have you any strategy in mind to alleviate this battle or this war? Surely it is the result of some misunderstanding, she said. If we can ascertain what that misunderstanding is and clarify it, the need for combat should be eliminated. What started it? Babylonia's misunderstanding about Persia's ability and will to defend its territory, Mim sang grimly. She frowned. Babylonia is a bit out of my regular territory, but from all I understand, it is no shining example of decency. But then, neither is Persia. It was an awful mess, extricating the captive threads of over 100 Western hostages from that country. A pox on both their houses. Why are you so eager to save their children, then? I could say that it is because some of those children are mine, holding Western beliefs in their secret hearts. That certainly is what first alerted me to this problem and brought me here, but once I saw the full horror of it, I knew I had to act to protect all those children. I don't care what their beliefs are. They don't deserve to die in a stupid war fashioned by fanatic adults. I don't care how complicated it is, those children have to be saved. Mim discovered that he was coming to like this woman's attitude. He had never had much to do with children, but certainly they represented any nation's hope for the future. I agree that the children are not responsible for this war, he sang. I would prefer to see those who cause wars have to serve on the front lines. Lachesis laughed, and suddenly he placed that nagging recognition. He had known someone who laughed like that. That would end this war in a hurry, wouldn't it? Are you from Ireland? Mim asked. She glanced at him, surprised. This aspect is. Of course now I serve a wider clientele. Why do you ask? I knew a woman from Ireland. A beautiful and good woman, and your hair, your face, I think in youth you must have looked very much like her. I have come to distrust coincidence since assuming this office, she said. Did Satan have a hand in your ascension? He helped eliminate the former Mars, if that's what you mean, but he didn't have any hand in my actual selection. Are you sure? Why were you ready for this office at the appropriate time? I had been denied my fiancée, owing to an abrupt change of political circumstance, and... He broke off. Does Satan dabble in politics? Does a fish breathe water? She fixed her gaze intently on him. That woman you knew, did she sing? Mim spread his hands. I never heard more beautiful music. She had a little harp. Orb, he agreed. You know her? I am her mother. Mim was stunned. Now the hair, features, accent, and laugh all came clear, like mother, like daughter. But what an amazing coincidence that he should encounter the mother of his former lover. Coincidence? You said you distrust coincidence, he sang. Because you arrange much of what to mortals appears to be coincidence. Do others do the same? They shouldn't, but one does. Satan, she agreed. I very much think he has been interfering again. What reason could he have had to want you in this office? Apart from my inexperience that he might take advantage of, I can think of none. But you know my daughter. I loved your daughter, but circumstances forced our separation. And now I love Rapture. This was no design of mine, or fault in Orb. He shrugged. It happened. And Orb loved you? Yes. But she knew why I had to leave her, and I think by now she has made her own life. She is a wonderful person. Is it possible that Satan was jealous of you? Mim broke into a stuttering laugh. For what possible reason? Because my daughter loved you. That sobered him. Satan has an interest in Orb? Lachesis pursed her lips. Possibly in his devious fashion. Satan, well, he once expressed interest in me when I was young and attractive. I was said by some to be the most beautiful woman of my generation, and males are attracted to that sort of thing. Orb is not far off that standard, and she inherited that phenomenal musical talent from her father's side of the family. Satan tried to prevent her from getting her harp, and her cousin Luna from... Luna? My granddaughter. But... She smiled. I bore Luna's father in my youth, and Orb later. It is complicated. We raised the two girls together, and they were like sisters. Now, but Luna does not resemble Orb. Both are beautiful women, but the manner, the bones, the hair... But he knew as he spoke that the two did resemble each other, and that was the undefined thing he had been aware of in Luna. Luna dyed her hair brown and adopted different ways. That, too, is complicated to explain. At any rate, Luna is slated to balk Satan's grand design to assume greater power on Earth, and Satan has been laboring mightily to eliminate her. But she is protected by Thanatos, so he must be roundabout. Orb, however, is not so protected, so he may have mischief in mind for her to put pressure on me and on Luna. And I dislike saying this. He may have a certain personal interest in Orb, because it seems he is partial to that type of woman. That might be a ruse, of course. At any rate, if any of this conjecture of mine is true, Satan might resent whatever man Orb took an interest in, and act to eliminate that man. Mim was appalled. Could Satan arrange to have a prince killed? Surely so. Satan can arrange evil for any person not protected by another incarnation. It was my brother's untimely death that caused my separation from Orb, Mim sang, shaking with shock and anger. He was to be Raja. When he died, I had to assume that office. So I was denied Orb and given Rapture against my will, the circumstances of my love for... No mystery, Lachesis said. Rapture is lovely. And you were going to kill her, he sang, suddenly enraged at her. No, it was a bluff to make my point. You made it. I would not allow Rapture to be hurt. And Orb, if Satan threatened her, now? Mim spread his hands. I did not lose my feeling for her when I came to love Rapture. I would be vulnerable. Well, don't worry. I am watching Orb's thread. Satan cannot interfere directly with it without alerting me, and if I can't protect her, the other incarnations will help me. Satan knows that. I suspect that it was the other way around. He was trying to use you to hurt her. I wasn't watching your thread, and certainly not your brother's thread. And Satan was pretending to be my friend, Mim gritted. He does that. Never trust him. He always has some devious scheme brewing. But once he had taken me away from Orb, why would he try to separate me also from Rapture? To make you angry enough to qualify for the office of the Incarnation of War. But why would he want me in that office? I could not do him much mischief before, but now... Mim considered and realized that he didn't know how he might harm Satan. Surely I am or will be more of a threat to him now as an incarnation. One would think so. But of course you weren't supposed to know about his machinations in your life, if indeed we have conjectured correctly. Only our meeting here has clarified that. He had to know I would in time recognize the mother of the woman I once loved. She sighed. Yes, I suppose so. I suspect that we have not yet properly fathomed Satan's mischief. We must be alert for it. Satan never exerts himself without bad reason." She smiled briefly. "But we have drifted from the topic. How can we abate this battle or this war?" "By putting the one who started it on the front line," Mim sang. "We had agreed on that." She considered. "I had thought we were joking. But now I wonder, why not put that man here?" "Because it would be murder. You don't approve of that." "And you do?" "I would call it an execution. If the life of that one guilty man could cause the lives of the remaining children to be spared, I would gladly destroy him." She grimaced. "Then I leave it in your hands." She converted to her spider form and vanished. So quickly! Yet they had come to an agreement, and if she, like many of her sex, lacked the stomach for what was necessary, it made sense to leave it in the hands of one who could handle it. Mim withdrew from the boy and mounted his horse, leaving the battle frozen. They galloped across the terrain of Babylonia, seeking the palace of the ruler of the nation. This took time, but it didn't matter, for the battle was not operative. Mim located the man and, without ceremony, set a hand on his shoulder. This brought the man into Mim's magic frame. He disappeared from the eyes of mortals and was carried through the air, through the walls, and into the sky. Mim set him down on the battlefield, directly in the path of the boy he had inhabited before. Then he released the stasis. The battle resumed. The pieces of bodies completed their flights through the air and socked into the ground. The boy, boosted by the blast behind him, stumbled, caught his balance, and spied the gesticulating enemy before him. The boy reacted automatically. He stopped, raised his rifle, sighted, and fired. Whether his bullet scored was doubtful. Good marksmanship was unlikely in such circumstance, but his action alerted the other boys of this region. They stopped, raised their rifles, and fired. Several bullets tore into the man, and he screamed and fell. The boys charged up, saw the man's face, and exclaimed with amazement. They had seen that face before. It had been on posters used for hate training. They cried the name. A Persian officer spied the commotion and chanced his hide by coming to investigate. He, too, recognized the casualty. He gave orders, and the boys took hold of the corpse and dragged it back up the hill. The body was heavy, but there were many hands. Few were slow to realize that this detail was taking them away from the worst danger. The battle, such as it was, dissolved. Mim watched from his steed, invisibly. He saw them get the body into a bunker. He saw the boy he had occupied, identified as the soldier who had killed this horrendous enemy. The boy was an instant hero, given a commendation and sent to the rear to report to higher authorities. He would be safe, and neither he nor his mother would suffer further privation. Persia had said, publicly and often, that it would carry on the war until this enemy leader was deposed. Suddenly, the man was dead. The stated reason for the war had been eliminated. The attack was called off, and a de facto truce developed. No more children would die for a while. Perhaps the war would now be allowed to end, and the recovery could begin. Mim wasn't sure what the final judgment might be on his method of stopping this war, but he was satisfied. He had not only accomplished his objective, he had learned another way to make his position effective.